Indigenous Rights Radio, because knowledge is power.
Aimee Roberson is a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma and also of Chickasaw, Scottish, Irish, and English descent. She's a lifelong student of Mother Earth's wisdom and holds degrees in Geology and Conservation Biology. She's committed to reciprocity, community, and environmental stewardship and partners with people and all our relations to fulfill our caretaking responsibilities so that social ecological systems upon which we all depend continue to flourish. Throughout her career, Aimee has provided leadership to partnerships focused on environmental stewardship, co-creating a vision, integrating cultural values and ecological knowledge with science for meaningful decision-making, and implementing shared strategies in caring for people, wildlife, water, and ecosystems. Aimee comes to cultural survival from her role as the director of American Bird Conservancy's Southwest region. Previously, she served as the coordinator for the Rio Grande joint venture, and prior to that, worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, focused on conserving biodiversity and helping people adapt to our changing climate. Aimee is a co-founder of the Indigenous Kinship Circle and Regalia Making Relatives, and also serves on the board of the Big Bend Conservation Alliance, and previously on the boards of the Rio Grande and Sonoran joint ventures. Within a community, Aimee is learning Chahta anumpa and practicing traditional arts, growing and preparing traditional foods, and learning and teaching about a people's history, values, and responsibilities to care for our land, waters, and all our relatives. Aimee has recently been appointed as Cultural Survival's new executive director. I had the opportunity to meet with Aimee to get to know her better. So, Aimee, that was your bio. So, in your own words, just tell us a little bit about who Aimee Roberson is.
Well, first of all, I'm so happy to be here with you, Sheldon, and to be joining Cultural Survival as the executive director. It really feels like a dream come true for me, so it's a special day for me as well. And as you said, I'm a Choctaw and Chickasaw woman. I belong to the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and since I was a child, I've always been enamored with our natural world. I love to be in nature. I love to listen to birds and watch birds, to learn about our plant relatives and really all our relatives in the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
And this has led me to work, as you said, in conserving biodiversity, in stewarding the ecosystems upon which we all depend, and also on working with communities to plan for adapting to our changing climate. Of course, I'm also passionate about how these things intersect with Indigenous peoples and our lifeways, our sovereignty and rights. And I'm also deeply passionate about the continuance of my own cultures, Choctaw and Chickasaw cultures, and how I can contribute to our cultural survival and our cultural thriving.
Always so happy that you are with us, and we look forward to our journey. When I say we, I'm talking about the staff of Cultural Survival. So we're glad that you are here and joining us in Mexico for our retreat. So Aimee, you have a background in geology and conservation biology. Can you talk to us about how you got into this line of work, advocating for Indigenous peoples in the context of conservation stewardship?
Yeah. So, as I said, I always loved nature. And when I was thinking about going to college, I was trying to decide what should I study. And I thought about journalism. I thought about environmental law. But ultimately, I really wanted to understand more about Mother Earth and how she works and how she supports all life. So I was going to major in environmental studies, but I had a professor who said, no, if you're going to do science, you need to pick one.
Mm-hmm.
none of this interdisciplinary stuff, which is what environmental studies is. So I picked geology because the courses were so interesting and the professors were very good. And it's been an incredible foundation for me to understand the geophysical processes of how Earth works and how that's the foundation really for all of life on Earth. I would say, though, in retrospect, that I don't necessarily agree that you would have to pick one science because what I've come to understand is how everything is interconnected and how understanding a much broader perspective of our world is really necessary to know how to be good stewards and to conserve biodiversity. So when I went to graduate school, I wanted to get back to the idea of caretaking for our environment, for the Earth, and I chose to study conservation biology. Now there I had a teacher's assistant for an ecology class who told me, well, if you want to be a scientist, if you want to study ecology, you cannot be an environmentalist. You have to be objective. And if you're an environmentalist, if you're an activist, that's not going to work with science. Never made sense to me because I was like, well, why would I want to spend so much time studying ecology and the natural world if I didn't care about it, right? And so that's something, this kind of inquiry of why do some people care about our environment and others don't is something that's really driven my studies, my learning, and most of my career. And I came to realize really that one of the things that's very important in this regard is the intersection of the ideas of conservation, conserving biodiversity, stewarding the ecosystems that we all depend on, the intersection of those with Indigenous peoples and our cosmovisions, our lifeways, our culture, that all inform our knowledge systems, our understanding of how we are not separate from nature, that we are a part of nature, and that we have important responsibilities to contribute to the ecosystems that we live in. So it's become very apparent that while conservation, in mainstream conservation circles, I found that people weren't talking about this. They weren't talking about the fact that while Indigenous people make up 5% of the world's population, they steward 80% of the world's biodiversity. Mm-hmm. And this seemed very important to me. And I was like, why aren't people talking about this? And in fact, conservation at times has done just the opposite, where it's removed Indigenous people from our lands and made it impossible for us to be the caretakers. And so there's a shift in paradigm that needs to happen there. And this is what I got very interested in, is how do we make that happen? How do we help people to understand that Indigenous people are the best caretakers of our homelands, that we know from thousands and thousands of years of ancestral knowledge what to do?
It sounds very interesting, and we're happy to be learning all of this about you. So you are doing some work with Indigenous peoples on the ground as well, stewarding ecosystems and protecting biodiversity, and also planning for climate change adaptation. Talk to us a little bit about that. Just give us some details about that work that you're doing.
Yeah, so I've been meeting with Indigenous communities in partnership with other people across North America. And as we gather in community with Indigenous peoples, we've been learning about their struggles, about what they're doing to ensure that their lifeways and cultures continue, the challenges that they're facing in regard to that, especially what they're facing with climate change. And so we've been working to help communities to support them, to access resources, whether it's funding or in some cases technical assistance, to continue their good work, to continue taking up that responsibility to care for the land, to care for their cultures as part of the ecosystem, and really understanding what they need and trying to help find the support that they need to do that.
And you've also worked with the American Bird Conservancy. So tell us about, what they do there and also your most recent work at that conservancy.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I love birds. I love how when they sing in the morning and greet the sun, how it reminds us to be grateful for the day. to be present in the moment, and to be aware of what's happening around us. You know, one of the things we've heard from Indigenous communities we've met with is how they're not hearing the same bird songs in the morning. They're not hearing as many birds, that the birds, in fact, are disappearing.
Yeah.
And so we know from science that since 1970, which is less than one human lifetime, that we've lost, bird populations have lost 3 billion birds across North America. They've declined by that much. And so birds really are our canary in the coal mine that are telling us that we need to take urgent action. We need to restore the role of Indigenous peoples and other peoples in caring for the environment and being good stewards. And so at American Bird Conservancy, we focus on working in the places where birds that are declining the most and the fastest are living. And we work with the people there to talk about, you know, what needs to be done to be better stewards and to provide them with what they need to do that.
And you're also the co-founder of the Indigenous Kinship Circle. Tell us about the initiative, why the idea to found an organization like that. What does it do, and what it's all about?
Yeah. So the Indigenous Kinship Circle emerged out of a conservation initiative called the Central Grasslands Roadmap. And this is a group of people from Indigenous nations and also from many, many different sectors who are in relationship in some way with grasslands. And this is across the central grasslands of North America, from Canada through the U.S. into Mexico. And these are places where migratory birds live throughout their annual cycle and really remind us of how we're all connected. And so the Central Grasslands Roadmap got started in 2020 with their inaugural summit. And several of the Indigenous people who participated in that, including myself and a woman named Monica Rattling Hawk, who's from the Oglala Lakota Nation, we came together and wanted to elevate Indigenous voices and perspectives in conserving our grasslands and native prairies. And so we worked together to build solidarity with Indigenous peoples, to create opportunities for rekindling kinship roots, for learning from each other, sharing information, and also building bridges with policymakers and Western conservationists and scientists.
So I know that this is kind of a broad question. Indigenous peoples around the world face different challenges, like the issues for us in South Africa might be different to the issues for Diana in Guatemala. But there has to be some of these challenges that kind of stand out for you. So what do you think is the most challenging for Indigenous peoples around the globe? And you can pick any particular example, but what comes to mind when you think about the challenges of IPs today?
Yeah, so broadly speaking, we're facing these major challenges around the world, and that includes this extreme decline in biodiversity, ecocide, which is where we see whole ecosystems that are becoming dysfunctional, climate change, and of course, social inequity and injustice. And what I've really come to understand is how all of these things are interrelated and how all of them, they impact everyone, all life on this planet, but they disproportionately impact Indigenous peoples who are, you know, trying to care for their homelands and live in the way that they want to live to continue the life ways of their ancestors. So I think, you know, we see that things like colonization and unfettered capitalism and climate change are all coming together to make it very difficult for Indigenous people. I think that we need to keep our eye on climate change because on top of the challenges that Indigenous peoples are already facing and trying to stay connected to their lands or even reconnect to their ancestral homelands, that on top of that, climate change is just exacerbating everything and making life more difficult.
So There are various mechanisms put in place when we're thinking about solutions for the problems that Indigenous peoples face today. I can think about the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues as a global mechanism, for us to have a platform to raise our concerns. But sometimes I feel that we should also drive change. So, what do you think needs to be done to bring about solutions to some of these challenges, just in your opinion?
Yeah. So I think we really need to support Indigenous people to do things in their way, to maintain that connection to the land, to have their own way of governance, to make their own decisions, have autonomy and sovereignty. But also because Indigenous peoples have been marginalized from the dominant cultures around the world through colonization, they sometimes we need reparations. We need to bring them additional support, whether that's financial or technical, so that they can continue to do what Indigenous people do and to live the way they want to live. And I think there's lots of ways to do this. As you said, there's these large global forums, but providing that support on the ground is also very important. And in between, kind of building the networks, building the solidarity of Indigenous peoples with each other so that we can learn from each other and support each other.
Okay, so this question I'm gonna bring it a little bit closer home, your new role as ED. So have you thought about, your vision, what it would be like to work for cultural survival, and are you thinking about goals and what the next 5 years or 10 years might look like for us as staff of cultural survival, for us as an organization that has been around for 52 years? Just share some of your goals and some of your thoughts stepping into this new role.
So I think that cultural survival already has a really beautiful vision and mission or purpose. And I'm a huge fan of the work that you all have been doing and just really grateful to be stepping into this role and to be a part of it. When I think about being the executive director, I'm thinking about something I saw recently where Elaine Alec, who's an Indigenous woman in Canada and is the CEO of Nakshmi Storytellers, and has created a framework for facilitating decision-making and governance based on Indigenous values and methodologies. I saw her recently describe herself as CEO, and she defines that as Chief Empowerment Officer. And so this is kind of how I just really love this, and I see that as my role is to empower the cultural survival staff to continue the good work they've been doing. I think I can provide some guidance and maybe refining some of the focus areas that we want to work on together, and helping us all figure out how we want to move forward. But for me, it's really about how do we work together as a team collectively? How do we fulfill a particular niche within the broader community of people working on similar issues and other organizations? How do we find our specific role so that we can all together achieve that beautiful vision?
Thank you. Sounds good. And we are looking forward to it as well. So this is our last question now. You've mentioned that you are learning Chahta and Anumpa, which is a Choctaw language, and you also practice traditional arts, and you also grow and prepare traditional foods. So we'd like to hear a little bit more about your passions. Tell us about all that.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking about that. I appreciate it. So yeah, as I mentioned, I'm passionate about the survival and thriving of my own cultures, and I'm always looking to how can I contribute to that. And so one of the things that my family and I like to do is to grow our traditional foods. And we have from both my Choctaw and Chickasaw ancestors, we have seeds that have been with our people, have been with our families for hundreds and hundreds of years, and in fact were carried from our homelands when we were forced to walk the Trail of Tears to Indian Territory. And so some of these include Chikasha Tanchihoma, which is a Chickasaw red corn, very sweet red corn that my husband and I are growing and hope to be able to share the seeds with more of our people. And also isito, which is a Choctaw sweet potato squash. And so these are plant relatives that we've been in relationship with for hundreds and hundreds of years. So I'd love to be able to continue that relationship. I'm also, as you said, studying our language. Our Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma provides many opportunities for doing this. I'm currently taking online classes on Zoom on a weekly basis and learning, how to keep our language alive. And then I'm also the vice president of the board of a nonprofit group called Regalia Making Relatives. And we hold cultural classes monthly and other events to help share our knowledge, to connect youth and elders, to continue our culture and traditions through traditional arts and other indigenous knowledge. So I myself am a beader. I love to do beadwork. It makes me very happy and relaxed. I find it very peaceful and meditative. And usually I'm making it for friends and family as gifts, or maybe an embassy when I'm meeting with other indigenous people. But recently I submitted a piece of my artwork to my first art show. So I'm excited about that. The Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma has an annual art show. And I was recently informed that my submission was accepted. So I'm looking forward to participating in that way as well.
We are certainly looking forward to be working with you. And I think on behalf of the staff and the board, we'd like to bid you welcome. Thank you so much for being our new ED. And we look forward to working with you. Thank you, Aimee.
I thank you so much too. And I'm just so excited and grateful to be here with you.
Thank you very much. Aimee Roberson, our brand new Executive Director of Cultural Survival. I'm Sheldon Ferris for Indigenous Rights Radio in Mexico. For more on the rights of Indigenous peoples, visit cs.org and follow Cultural Survival on Facebook and Twitter.